obviously you're performing on the 10th of November. Is it the 10th of November? Yeah, the 10th of November.
Saturday, yes.
Saturday the 10th. So next week.
Mm-hmm.
So are you looking forward to that? How are you feeling about it?
I'm excited, renewed. A story can be told once again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a privilege to be any part of it, really.
How did you get involved with the project, or how did you hear about the way we were? Were you approached, or did?
Yes, okay. So I was doing sequence dancing at tea dances in the afternoon, twice a week, and Freddie happened to come to one of our tea dances to see what was going on.
Okay.
Liked what she saw, and she asked the gentleman at the door, who do I'd like to ask questions and know more about this dancing and understand it better.
Yeah.
Who's the best lady as person?
Mm-hmm.
So he said, Iris, right there.
Okay.
She's always here, and she's danced all her life, from doing folk dancing at school, lived through the war, danced in the war, in the areas where she was stationed in the Land Army, came back, always took up a dancing again, it's part of a hobby, but never had a lot of money to take it further, which she would like to have done.
Yeah.
And so the longing is still there, and this is the interest in someone else. Now I'm 83 now.
Okay.
So to see someone else live in my dream, that's what it feels like. Yeah.
So do you feel like you're kind of passing that on through what you did?
Absolutely.
Well, the way you had your own journey yourselves, and obviously I imagine the war wasn't exactly...
No, it wasn't. We lost our home in the war, lived in a church for 2 or 3 months till we found somewhere to live. My mother had a baby as well as me. Okay. I was 14, and she certainly produced another little girl, quite unexpectedly. And so she and the baby were brought up through the war, and I went into the Land Army at 17 and a half and left home. Used to come home at weekends. I wasn't working, I would come home. And so it was. And then after the Land Army and after the war, then I married a sailor and went out to live in Malta for 3 years.
Wow.
So, yeah. And there we used to just live like a sailor's wife, but you were limited. You had an allowance and you kept within it.
Right, okay.
But I used to do entrepreneur. I fancied myself as entrepreneur because they wouldn't allow us to take the jobs off the local Maltese people. There wasn't enough to go around after the war, and things were difficult. So I used to, I looked after Sliema Wanderers football kit for a while, the whole team. I mean, if they used to come from a match with ripped trousers out, shirt, whatever, a bit rough, and they were all muddy and wet, then they would have to see to them. So I volunteered to help where I could, so I finished it with the whole team, 12, 13 men with the full football strip, and I would mend them, then I would wash and iron them and ready for the next week.
So it was the full hogs that they all get washed, and then you'd have to get your tools out and become a seamstress and...
Oh yes, mend them up and iron them up and send them up. As good as new, I used to say. They're as good as new, there you are. And in return, and I wouldn't, look, you couldn't make a charge. So they used to, and I used to make a cake, because I offered them cake, and I used to like baking in those days. And so I used to greet them with a cake, enough to go around the team, you see, big one. Wow, yeah. She's worth knowing, you know. So they hung on to me. So I was sort of adopted by the team the whole of the 3 years I was there. And I just loved it. I really did. And of course, then they said, if there's some money to be made through it, we come together, will you accept it? So I said, all right, I've got a little tin, I'm saving it up. what are you going to do with her? When I go home back to England, I've nowhere to live, nowhere to go, I've nothing, just a husband, and he'll still be in the Navy. So I built a home, started from scratch.
Wow.
Very much like this story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good. So, when did you come back from Malta? What year was that? Do you remember?
1952.
1952. So we're talking 10 years after the Second World War officially ended.
Yes, that's right.
Because obviously it then took years after that.
It took years after, yes. I mean, the food rationing went on until 1952 in England.
So you moved from Malta back to the UK. Mm-hmm. Where is it you went back to, or went to rather?
Well, I went home to my mother's.
Okay.
I had a mum and dad, and I had a sister who was born at the beginning of the war, so she's still a little schoolgirl.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and my mother said, "What are you going to do?" So I said, "I've got to find somewhere to live." And I said, "I've saved up whilst I've been away for a deposit for a house. I'm going to buy a house." She thought this was wonderful because they were still in a little rented house and nothing much had moved.
Yeah.
My dad he had chest problem, emphysema.
Yeah.
He didn't make a lot of money, he was ill half the time. So my child was a bit troubled with that.
Okay.
So I was determined not to be responsible for myself. So I'd saved all this money in Malta, came back, put a deposit on a house and started off. My husband still went to sea.
Right.
So I used to live on my own with this baby and he'd go off to sea.
And whereabouts was that then? Was that
in Hull?
In Hull? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always lived in Hull. I was born in Leeds.
Okay.
That's where my mum came from. And my dad was from Staffordshire.
Okay.
So they met through circumstance of theirs. And he said he wanted to live in Hull because he'd found a little corner shop and he was going to start a business.
Oh, right. Wait, see, so that's where you got your entrepreneurship from?
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
So it started when I was still a baby, toddler. I can remember some of it actually. I'd be barely 2.
Yeah.
And they used to sit me outside in a yard, outside of the shop. And I was taken care of by a black and white dog.
Okay.
Yeah. The dog was devoted to me.
Yeah, well.
And until I had a rusk, and they used to come and give a baby a rusk, she's getting unsettled. So I'm there teething and sucking on this rusk, and the dog to me, and as soon as he'd snatch it off, until I can remember that.
See, and how old were you then?
Be 2. You see, in those days, the children kept as children.
Yeah.
And old-fashioned methods. So the high chair came outside in the yard with the child strapped in, with the rein strapped in, hooked in. Couldn't get out, but you had to sit there. You have your rusk and you'll sit there for maybe an hour, 2 hours, till you needed changing again. But like I say, I was turned 2 and I can remember it vividly.
Okay, so whereabouts in Hull was that then?
In Hull, it was in St James Square, which is in the old where there's now overhead bridge. You know Hull?
Yeah.
There's an overhead bridge which coming out of the town into Porter Street, and there's all flats now. It's totally different. And then it goes into Hazel Road. Yeah. And then there are 2 or 3 schools up there. Yeah. So my schoolhood days would be in Villa Place School down in Hazel Road.
Right, okay.
And a lot of the children there had daddies going to sea in the trawlers. So, I made a lot of great friends. There's not many of them left now. I'm 83. Yeah. I think I'm the last of the clan. Maybe, there's no one living in Hull that remembers me, but yes, away from Hull there are, but they don't want to be involved in this kind of thing. It's not for everybody.
It's not, but I think it
It
brings...
has to, somebody has to tell the story.
Yeah, which is why the way we work is fantastic, because it's looking backwards
I
and
think
also
so.
in order for us to move forward as well.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
it.
it's impactful because, like you say, you know, a lot of your friends
Yeah.
are sadly not with us anymore, or they've moved away. And if we don't document these stories, we don't tell these stories, we don't share your experiences, then how are we going to not make the same mistakes again?
It's very true.
Which is why I think
it should be told.
I'm a massive believer in it. You know,
So am I.
I think there's a phrase:
Yeah.
you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been, which is like learn from the past and then move forward
That's right,
from there, because then you
that's
understand
right.
who you are. So in relation to that, then looking at this piece, so was it the tea dances? Was it?
The tea
What's
dances,
What's that about?
well, it's called that because you go, there's no bars, and I think it's just a cup of tea at the interval. So you
Okay.
dance for an hour, and it's quite non-stop, actually. Nowadays, they try to cram, it's ballroom dancing in sequence.
Okay.
So there are dozens of new sequence arrangements, but the basics are the same.
Yeah.
So it's basic ballroom. And I go to 2 o'clock, have a cup of tea, dance till 4 o'clock, and go home. Twice a week I do that.
Okay.
I've been doing it for the last 10 years.
Okay. And that's in Hull as well, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
To me, it filled a gap after I lost my husband, and I'm on my own, and children have left the nest.
There's that loneliness.
And loneliness, and going back to people of my era who are still the ones that used to dance then,
Yeah.
would they would leave it, and then afterwards, in my position, I think I'll go dancing like I used to do.
Yeah.
And that's when, and it was mainly waltzing, and all the things that they use in this.
In the performance. So
Performance.
the dancing is very
Yeah,
looking at
it's
the
exactly
time
the same.
and bringing it back to. So have you
Yeah.
were you an influence in? Well, not an influence, but like a repository of information for what was happening at that time, the types of dancing that was done. Because I know there's history,
Yeah,
but
that's
you
right.
lived it.
Because I was at a tea dance, and a lady came up to me, and she said, "Could I have a word?" Yeah. So she said, "You obviously know what you're doing. You're not a beginner." So I said, "No, I've danced since I was 16.
Okay.
Before that, I was doing folk dancing at school. I loved to dance, loved music." Right. So she said, "I thought so." So she said, "What are you doing here?" So I said, "Well, I do tea dances twice a week." And she said, "Oh, that's wonderful." Well, I said, "I think it is, and it's wonderful." When I found out about what Freddie was going to try to set up, I was there when she came. "I've got this idea. What do you think?" So there was this lady with doing the paper, a reporter. So we were together like a thing arrangement. Yeah. What do you think, Iris? I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yes.
I really do. You think it'll work? Of course it will. And I was proud that they'd chosen something in our city.
Yeah.
I do think we have a wonderful city. If I have visitors that come from away, you must go and see the town. You must go and see our Ferrens Gallery.
Yeah,
You must do all that with them. Proudly. And my husband, when he was alive, was he was in city treasurers, and he worked through local government, and he became in charge of recreation in the city, and used to put the dances on at the city hall.
Oh, brilliant.
So all that went on. So I was sort of familiar with it, always wanting things to happen. And then he died, and I still went to my tea dances, and that's what was happening in this Marist ballroom, college on Berry Road.
Is it the
And
Marist
she was
Church?
there.
Is that where?
Yes, it belongs to the Marist. It's like a little ballroom with a stage. There's enough room for a little band to play. It's not all CDs.
Yeah.
That was when you
And so, anything to do with dance, it just draws me.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So Joe walks in on this.
But
Then you walk
so with that, Because you've mentioned a few different locations, which, like you say, you go and take people to go and see, like the Friends Art Gallery, the City Hall, the Guildhall. You've got the pier. You've got now the Deep that's going on. You've got Humber Bridge, obviously, which is like well known. But there's a few gems hidden away within the city itself. So, for example, if you go down the avenues, you've got all the artwork going on down there as well, and that's got a whole history behind it as well. But people don't know about it.
Yeah.
Often people come into the city and they just go to,
Well, yeah.
I'm going to go to a pub or go to a bar, and
Understand
that's
it.
all they see.
I understand it.
And they don't see any. They don't understand this underlying heartbeat of Hull.
It's true, because when we had that big blaze across
At the was it Queen
between the
Victoria
gallery
Square?
and the right across, we got a lot. I went quite a few times to see it actually, and then my grandson and my great grandson.
Wow.
So there were and my daughter. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4 generations. One day we go out to lunch in the town, and then we'll take the youngest one to see the blade. And so the dad of the youngest one says, I want to see the blade. I mean, he'd gone to college in Hull College and studied music. And so it was a family interest.
Brilliant.
And of course she was born on Headon Road, the mother of the family. Anyway, the 4 generations there, proud. I was proud as punch, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I really was.
It seems that dancing and music's within yourself, but you passed it on as well to your children as well.
That's
and
right.
Grandkids and so on.
Absolutely. Mainly in the music rather than the dance.
Okay.
They all play guitar, a flute. A lot. My grandson can pick up any instrument and
play
after
away.
fiddle about. Yeah, this is good. So they are like that.
Fantastic. So going back to how you got involved at the tea room, so what happened from there? Because obviously Fred's then told you about the idea, what she's doing. How did you then get involved? What was it you were doing? Were you more of an advisory and then...
Okay. So after I'd met up and this lady from the newspaper said what did I think to the idea? I think it's absolutely wonderful. Yes. And the story...
And that was 2015, wasn't it? In 2015.
Yeah, that's right. And when I had the outline of what they were trying to do through the dance, I said, that's just absolutely amazing. I would be honoured to be a part of any of that in any way at all. I really would, and so good. You consider yourself on, and something could have grew from there. And then the story line was explained to me, and I don't know, I just lived it. I lived my youth again.
So it took you back to that...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It did.
So that must have been...
It was very moving for me. It choked me up even now watching these 2 young ones, these two, when she was going to be evacuated, and that's the cases, and they sent all the children to war. My throat was knotting just watching it.
Because you're going back to that time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lived through it.
See, that's quite powerful.
It is, because that's when my sister was born, and she was a baby, and you could only be evacuated if you went with the baby. They took all the children away, in trains, took them to villages, and who's going to have this child? These two don't want to be separated, brother and sister. Yeah.
Because from what you're saying there, the impact it has on you, having lived it, that can't be lost.
No, never.
And I think through projects like this, I think this is such an insightful project because Freddie was saying that you actually go into the schools and you do like workshops and talk to the students and the pupils there about your experiences.
Yes, I do.
Incorporating dance as a medium through which to tell your story.
Yes.
And for me, I thought, this dance has to be an annual event. And the location for me is, I did say it when I was interviewing Freddie, it's key because it's that thing of waving them away on the trains.
It's perfect.
And it's just so fitting of people coming and going into the city.
Yeah, it works.
And I think it works so
Absolutely.
powerfully.
The first time we did it, it was working for me. I was going back in time and I was choked up and I was just living it. I thought, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do it and feel, and then go back to living alone in an old lady, and I don't consider myself all that. I'd be very upset if I couldn't do it. I really would. I would be crying on the inside.
Okay. So what does this mean to you then, the way we were? I ask the same question to Fred. What does it mean to you in terms of the project, in terms of the story, in terms of being part of it?
Well, I feel it's just part of my history, my experience. It brings it all back. My youth and the hard times and the good times. And the dance, and the way that the dancing brought the people back together again. Even during the wartime, there was more dance halls full of service people in the war than ever.
Yeah.
And of course, it was recreation for them. And I used to go as a land girl in these heavy country jodhpurs and jumpers and the baroque shoes. And I'd still go dancing there. Will you have me? Yeah, come on in. And I'd just dance like that. Anything, just to be in that place again. The story should always be told, and nothing's, for me, I've always felt that. And it's more so now. We should be working together.
Yeah.
As one. For our children and their children. And it's for me. It's frustrating and it's painful, but at the same time, whatever's going on in my head now, I can get rid of it by doing something like this. And again, telling the story, which it should be told. And I do go to schools. I've been to the school that Fred is involved with, but north, south, east, and west of Hull, I've done the schools, not just that. So I was already doing that before I met Freddie.
Yeah.
But again, for me, that was just a fill-in, finding myself living alone, and it just been among people, feeling useful.
I was going to say, how does that impact on you? Because obviously, if you didn't have these kind of projects going on, then what would you typically be doing? I would always be dancing until my last breath. I'd want to be able to dance, so be among